and off the cuff, being live, being exciting. Good stuff. So hello, everyone.
Numerous attempts to extort some questions from you have failed. So
yeah, you did try. Ben did definitely try to get things from me. Let me just check that we're live. We've had some problems with LinkedIn. So I'm just ducking over here to the other screen. Look, there we are on LinkedIn. That is actually working. Squirrel is live right now. Good. Okay. So I'm going to assume that we're there, and we have 17 people watching us already, which is fantastic.
Oh,
everybody actually came along. Good stuff.
Oh, wow.
And I imagine other people will join soon. In case you're confused or you're not sure where you are, this is the Squirrel Squadron forum. And this is our session on actually intelligent business intelligence, which we're going to be talking about a lot. If you don't know what the Squirrel Squadron is, well, I better tell you. That's my community of people who are interested in talking amongst tech and non-tech people about all kinds of technical issues and non-technical issues. So we have these events every week. Some are live streams like this that everyone can come to. Some of them are for the executive part of the community. Those are Zoom calls. So a long list of those over at SquirrelSquadron.com. So you can go check those out if you want to. I'm seeing a bunch of people drop off, so I'm just a little bit worried that we have a problem on LinkedIn again. I'm going to go back, see if I can just make sure we're okay over there. If there are problems, if anybody has problems connecting, get in touch by phone or email. I'm checking both, so you can certainly find me. Let's see if this is the right one. Are we still there? Victor says he's there. And I see myself on LinkedIn, so I assume that we're live and everything is working, and maybe StreamYard can't count. So that's all right. I'm going to assume we're going. And of course, we also have several interesting events coming up. So next week is one on wearing too many hats. I have lots of ideas and suggestions for what you can do when you're feeling overwhelmed, you're doing too much. We have ones on security coming after that. So that's the next live stream is on what you actually have to know. What's the theoretical minimum you have to do for security? Because there is a bit you have to do, but it can seem way overwhelming. So we'll cover that. And then I'm coming back live to London on the 5th of May. So that's going to be a topic on being bolder. So if you're interested in being bolder, getting your tech team to take more risks, be more aggressive, try more things. Again, I have lots of ideas and suggestions for concrete things you can do to address that. So great to see several people, and they're checking in on the comments, which is great. So I'm going to start by asking everybody, if you wouldn't mind, just go to whatever comment forum you're on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook. We should be able to see all of them. And just tell us what brought you here. So what kinds of challenges or problems do you have in business intelligence? Do you have already the most intelligent business intelligence? You know everything that's happening in the business with pinpoint accuracy. If so, you're probably in the wrong place. So go do something more fun, take a walk. But if not, would you please write in the chat what are the issues and problems for you? And I'm going to let Ben introduce himself in just a moment, but let me tell a story first while you're writing your comments and thoughts in the chat. And that is when I was CTO at a company called Secret Sales, a company that had amazing sales of very high-end products. We had a tremendous debate about a particular business decision we had to make. And that was, what should we put in the subject lines of emails being sent to 1 million people? So every day we would send customized emails, all adjusted to the person that we were sending it to. This was pretty revolutionary in 2012. And those emails then triggered people to come to our site and buy stuff. And what to put in the subject line was something people had passionate opinions about. Everybody really knew what the right answer was. The problem was nobody agreed on that answer. They all had the right answer according to them. So we brought in a data scientist. What a shocking idea. And this person said, I'm actually going to do a test. And he did a test. And what he did is he asked everyone to propose different subject lines. So one person said, we have to have the % off. It's going to be 50% off Louis Vuitton handbags. You have to say it in that order. And you have to say starting today or something like that. You have to have those 3 elements in that order. Somebody else would say, oh, that's useless. You have to put the brand first. That has to be brand and then discount and then today. Somebody else said, that's complete nonsense. You have to put what day it is first, that it's starting this day and it's going to be closing tomorrow. You have to create the urgency. So he tried a whole bunch of different subject lines and split up our 1 million users. Seems obvious. Why had we never done this before? I don't know. And he went out and tried a whole bunch of subject lines. So I'll take guesses while you're writing in the chat. I will take guesses. I'm going to ask Ben for his guess in a second. Which subject line performed the best? So I gave you a few examples. There were more examples, but what would get the most people to open the subject line, open the email, click into the website and actually buy the product? That was the puzzle. And when we went out and actually checked it, you won't be surprised. I'm telling the story because the answer was surprising. Ben, any guesses from you? What would be the most popular subject line?
Either something with money in it, something with emojis in it. I don't know. Maybe what I click on.
So if it has emojis, is that what you said?
Emojis or money?
Emojis or money? Excellent.
Or emojis of money.
So I think we tried emojis. Those in 2012, those were a little less prevalent. So I'm not sure they were displaying quite as well. So emojis didn't work. That was not the winner. The winner was Louis Vuitton. That was the whole subject line. So the shortest possible subject line, which had the brand name in it, because that was what people were excited about. And that outperformed everything else massively. Now, the reason I tell the story is that we thought we had intelligence, and everybody had really great arguments. I tried this and it worked in this sale and it was really useful. They had an awful lot of anecdotes and tests and things they had done, which they thought really proved what worked. It wasn't until we applied some human intelligence to really focus in on this question that we answered it definitively. And then the result, that's the other piece of the story that I think is very important. The result was we changed our subject lines. We gave just the brand name and we increased, I can't remember now, it's 10 years ago, I don't remember how much, a very substantial amount of sales increased as a result. So we got a business result from this application of human intelligence to this data problem. So, Ben, I think you do that all the time, all day, every day at GeckoBoard. So do you want to tell us a bit about you and how you do that?
Yeah, something like that, sure. So my name's Ben. Hi. I am the VP of Product at GeckoBoard, where I've been for 8 and a bit years now, which is like a lifetime, I'm sure, in tech terms. So GeckoBoard, for those of you who don't know, A, shame on you, and B, it's a tool for really quickly and easily building KPI dashboards with all of the most important business metrics from all the tools that you're using. So rather than having to dump it all into a data warehouse and then put stuff on top of that, we will natively connect to the tools that you're using, like Zendesk, Salesforce, Google Analytics, and so on and so forth, and make it really easy for just normal folks to come in and build dashboards themselves. So no waiting around, no long process of, oh, can you add this to my board? And 6 weeks later, the head of engineering relents and gets it done. You just go in there and do it yourself.
And does it wrong too.
And does it wrong too, yes. And then you another 6
doesn't
weeks
do what you wanted. Yeah. Exactly. And Ben, I remember you, of course, when we worked together first long ago. Ben is one of my first clients at GeckoBoard. When we worked together, the main focus was on dashboards that were in offices. So there were great big things above the sales team saying, more sales today, great job. Is that still the focus? Do you do it a different way today? How has GeckoBoard evolved?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, with the last couple of years, the whole TV dashboard thing, TVs and offices, not such a hot segment. I'm not going to lie. Something went on that kind of made the whole being in the office thing a little bit.
Yeah, although people are coming back. I was in an office on Tuesday.
It is turning around. But I think actually what we found, I mean, which we kind of knew already, but what we found through that is that yes, that was a big use case for us, and it was a helpful one for us to position on. But actually, the core value is bringing that data together and making it really easy to understand, because we kind of focus on clean, simple visualization, and also making it really easy to share inside an organization. And that carried on. So, that pipe didn't go away, thankfully, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But instead, what we've done more now is we are trying to shift away from that more towards, basically non-TV sharing. So we have like Slack integrations, better experience on desktop, dashboards via email, and so on and so forth. And we've got a lot of plans, secret plans over the kind of coming year or so to switch out what we do a little bit and give people a little bit more power now that we don't have to assume that you can look but can't touch like you can on a TV. So we can let you do a little bit more.
Fantastic. Okay. And I remember that was always one of the plans was, how can we get off the TV? Because there's more to do. You just got it a little bit accelerated, I think.
Yeah, it kind of forced our hand a little bit. Yeah.
I can see why. Good stuff. So we have some really great comments here. And for the purpose of the recording, by the way, there will be a recording available afterwards. You just click the same link and come back. So if you have to go or something, or if you have a friend who you want to come see it, they can come right here and watch it again. Because the comments won't be there, let me read out a few of those. So what do you need to know before starting such an initiative? That's from Sanjeev. Yassine says, who should the head of BI report into? Stuart says he's upgrading his BI system, and he also says hi to Ben. Good community going here. We all know each other, or many of us do. We are upgrading our existing BI system to centralize more data. Sounds like something Ben knows a lot about. Tim says he's using New Relic, and he kind of fell into it. The longevity isn't great. He's looking for greater durability. I'm curious what he means by that. Wendy says a lot of data migration from on-premise to Google Cloud Platform. And she wants to make sure that they can drive decisions instead of just looking pretty. That's a vital thing that my story was about, driving a real decision. So that sounds fantastic. And Edwin says how to document the definition and attribution of data in an e-commerce system. What counts as an order? Yeah, boy, what a complicated process, right? Is a canceled order an order? Is an order that was partially returned an order, or is it half an order? And how much does the sales team get, or the marketing team get credit for it? All kinds of fun things. Yeah, when does that order count? When is it really done? Do you have to wait until the return period is over, or the chargebacks? Lots of fun. I've fought with all of those questions loads of times. Ben, any favorite question in there? I think we'll focus on questions. I have a few bits and arguments to have with you, Ben. I bet I'm going to be able to disagree with you in some productive way. But let's focus on the things that listeners, viewers were interested in. Any of those catch your fancy?
I guess I'm curious, the question about beginning such an initiative, I'd be curious to know more about what is meant by an initiative, like such an initiative, because I guess that's...
So I know a little bit about Sanjeev's situation, so he's very welcome to say something different, but to keep us going, I'm curious, Ben, what would you do if you had no BI at all? So, and you probably have the situation of some of your clients. So you have somebody who shows up and says, we've never had a dashboard. We have no idea what we're selling. We just guess, or maybe find out from finance 6 months later. What would you do? How would you get it started?
I guess something I always think about is like, what do we mean when we say BI? I think it's kind of what I'm thinking about here, because I think BI as a product category means kind of it's a product category that does many different jobs, I suppose, and some of them are the ones that are more kind of pressing and urgent for you at the point that you're at in your company, in your life cycle, and some are not. Which I think about a lot in terms of like Geckoboard versus more advanced kind of powerful tools and so on. And to be clear, like we use both. We use Geckoboard for a bunch of stuff, and we use BI tools and analysis. So I think it kind of depends. Like if you have like nothing at all, you're not tracking it. In fact, I did actually speak to someone doing this the other day. So I spoke to a customer who they ran a series of let's just say like retail, couple of retail operations in the States. And they're quite small, but they were really keen to do metrics, really, which is something I hear a lot. I think over the last few years.
Let's do metrics. Hey, wouldn't that be fun?
Exactly.
I'm not sure what it is, but let's do it.
Out, hasn't it, from like startup land into everyone else? And it reached this person. They thought, I really want to do this properly. And what they'd done, which I think was pretty good actually, was he'd actually just gone away and made a big spreadsheet. And he really tried to start with like, what are the KPIs that are actually going to be informative to me? They're going to be informative to my managers, because they had a few stores. And he was really thinking about my view. What do I want from that? Their view, what do they want from that? And it really kind of just started like listing out the KPIs, and then from there going, okay, well, how can we do that? And for some of these things, they had tools, and they said, okay, well, we can get this number from QuickBooks, and we can get this number from somewhere else. And then for a lot of it, if you're starting out, you don't really have anything. A lot of it, you're probably going to be typing into spreadsheets. It's probably going to be manual, and like that's okay.
And that's not bad. Yeah, exactly. That's a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it depends, like whether you're that, or whether you're you're a business, you're using a bunch of tools already. Maybe you've got databases with data in them connected to your own systems, your own applications. Maybe you're already using Google Analytics, Mixpanel for like event tracking, QuickBooks for revenue, whatever. And it's more about, hey, we've got all this stuff. Like, what are we really doing with it? And I think there again, you have to start with like, well, what do you want to do with it? Is the problem that you have questions that occur periodically that need a kind of really deep investigation? And if so, it's going to be more about probably getting that into a place where you can stick some kind of quite hardcore analysis tool on it. But also recognizing that's only half the battle, right? Because if you really need to do that kind of thing, tooling, warehousing, that's all part of it. The other part of it is actually having people who can ask those questions effectively, because something that I think we both experienced ourselves and we believe at Geckoboard is it's not enough to just give people like all these tools that like let you slice and dice data and do so on and so forth. There's a little skill associated with doing that effectively. So I think really being crystal clear on like, do you need to do bespoke ad hoc analysis? And if you do, you need something very different too. Actually, we just got some KPIs and we really need to keep track of these KPIs and we want to make sure we're checking on them like once a month, or like, you know, we're just not measuring the success of our initiatives. And we need to make sure that every time we do something, we said like, what do we think would happen? And we've got a way to go and look at what we thought was going to happen at the end of that. So I think I'd be really clear on like, what it is you're trying to do.
Indeed. And let me suggest a way inspired by my wife's guide dog who's busy barking at the neighbors. Let me suggest a way to identify what those key things are. Because if you're in a situation like I think Sanjeev is in, where you've got quite a large, disparate, globally separated organization, knowing what you're trying to do is 90% of the battle, actually understanding it. So when the dog barks, something should happen. So I would start with, the dog wants me to go out there and either feed her or let her play with the dogs who are walking by. But your folks want to get an alert. They want to get some piece of information and do something. So Ben, in your old use case, and I'm still sure lots of people are still doing this, they want to see, sales are down today. Let's offer a sale. Or let's give a bonus to the salesperson who makes the most calls. Or they want to... somebody wants to understand that we're getting a high volume of customer service calls. Maybe the website's down. Maybe there's an outage for one of our partners and we want to take action on it. So the question I'd ask is that's the very first question I would ask of the people that you're polling when you're doing the research Ben is suggesting. What are you going to do? What action will you take? And in my original story, the action was we're going to change our subject lines and then we're going to check whether we make more money from them. And I just gave you a couple other examples. Ben, does that match your understanding that understanding what you're going to do when the BI system barks? Is that the key thing for you, or do you see it differently?
No, I think it's exactly that. I think it's about thinking. It's kind of similar. So my background's in product. It's a similar thing to when you're talking to people about features they want. You say, well, imagine you had that, then what? Exactly. And I think you can really do that with data. So you can say, well, okay, imagine I'm getting this number. Then, like, what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. Something that's similar that we do, have done in the past that's been quite useful is, almost like mocking it up or like mocking up what it would look like. Say you're thinking about a dashboard or even actually, when you're doing analysis, this comes up for us when we're doing some of the more intense stuff internally for us. It's like, before just digging in and jumping in and starting slicing and dicing, you try to imagine like, well, okay, imagine I've done this, then like, this is the chart I'm going to end up with. What's that going to tell me? Actually, if that's not going to tell you anything, you could save yourself all that time. And
not just tell you, but what you're going to do. So it's my wife's just gone out to comfort the dog. So that was the action that the dog got as a result of barking. But not only is it going to tell you something, but then you're going to change something. Because if you understand, first of all, people will often say they want to know stuff. And they really don't really need to know it because they aren't going to do anything with it. I remember we had at a finance startup that I was at, we had people around the world who were getting all kinds of different data about where the markets were going and what was happening. And you'd have somebody in Asia who would say, I desperately need the latest German figures. I really need to know them. They're super important for me. And we'd say, what are you actually going to do with the German figures? The German market isn't even trading when you're trading. You're asleep when they're awake and vice versa. And they'd say, we really need it. It's really super important. But when we did, we would find out there was nothing they were going to do with it. It was a notion of power for them. So their idea was, well, I get all the data because I'm an important person. There was a lot of one-upsmanship and who's got the bigger boat kind of thing going on there. And you may find the same kind of thing where people will say, I really need to know X. And knowing is not enough. What are you going to do with it? I think that's a crucial point. So I hope that's helpful.
Especially in the context like what you're saying there, where it's more like, I'm asking you to get me some numbers. Because I think there's a space in there between situations where the people who want to receive the data are not the people who themselves are going to be looking at it in some way.
Another very good
I think you can apply a much harder test. I think it's a little bit more fluid when the people are also going to be interrogating it in some way. Mm-hmm. Because then I think you do have a fuzzier boundary between, like, maybe there's something you're going to do, but that doing is going to come at the end of some longer process of...
You might not know what you're going to do, right? Yeah. So my wife might have gone out there to help the dog, and she might have discovered that the dog had found a burglar. Well, then we'd phone the police. That's a different action. And we might not know that until we get out there
until you get the person you're true. You still go with an intent, don't you? Like, your intent is, I'm going to go sort the dog out. You might...
You're going to do something. Exactly. So first of all, they better know they're going to do something. And second, they better know at least some examples of what they would do. And that's, I wouldn't let somebody get away with being that fuzzy. But if they say, I'm going to do something about our sales drop, and it's going to be a sale or a change in product line or something else, but I'm going to do something. Then I've got something that's useful, not just a power play or something I'm curious about, which I'm always looking out for. Sanjeev, I hope that was helpful. Very happy to answer more. And as we go through this, a couple people have been doing this. Please add more questions. This can't be quite as interactive, but I'm watching the chat, so I'd love to see more questions. This is best when we do that. And if we don't get to every question, we'll do our best to get as far as we can. Right. So I'm going to pick another one more or less at random here. Well, I'm actually going to ask Tim to clarify a little bit. Tim, what did you mean by the longevity isn't great? I don't have a good guess at what you meant. So if you come back, I'm really interested in your question, but I'm not sure what you meant by it. So here's Wendy saying something that's very close to what we've just talked about. She says, I want to make sure that the new BI stuff that I build, helps drive business decisions. So I was just saying, you better know what you're going to do with it. That's the first step. But she's going to build new BI tools on top of new data that she's gathering, which sounds fantastic. How do you make sure that they're going to drive business decisions? Ben, do you have a view on that? Should I take that one? What's your thought?
I've got a view, but I feel like I talked a bit already. So why don't you kick it off and I can jump in.
You're passing it over to me. Sounds fun.
So pass you the baton.
That sounds perfectly fine. So business decisions need to have a place to happen. So, and that may seem obvious, but it's often overlooked that somebody produces a report and says, this report is going to give me all kinds of information. It's really useful. It's valuable. This is one reason that I loved what Gecko Board was doing and still does, of having it up on a board. You almost can't avoid it. But even then you get kind of glazed, your eyes glaze over, right? After you've seen it every day for a while, you kind of say, okay, yeah, that graph seems to be going down. We should do something about that. And you forget. So one of the most important things that I find for helping make sure that the intelligence is actually used, which is what Wendy is looking for there, is making sure that there's some location, some recurring activity which triggers evaluation and action. The classic thing, of course, is that you find, and engineers on the call will know this, you find that there are 20 reports being emailed every day and 19 of them are not read. So you want the opposite of that. You want some process that is going to happen regularly where somebody says, okay, now it's time to look at whatever the piece of information is. And that I find that kind of recurrence is one of the best ways to make sure that a decision is made. Ben, pass the baton back to you. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So I think that, and again, just from my own experience in the company, but also seeing how people do and don't succeed with adopting a product like Gecko Board, there are those two layers, right? So one layer, which I think Wendy's kind of talking about there, which is like, yeah, it's not just about making it look pretty and how it looks. There's this whole other bit which, as a software vendor in the space, it's quite frustrating. There's a whole load of stuff that you just can't really influence. Like you can try to educate, obviously, and so on, but actually, things like dashboards or BI or reporting or whatever, these things, just creating them, just having a dashboard hanging around, just having a report hanging around, having some self-serve report hanging around, doesn't change anything unless it's integrated in some way into the way that the company works. Whether that's about adopting new processes or changing existing ones or automating previously manual things, you can kind of shuffle it that way. So I think the other thing that I like to think about in terms of this is kind of pulling apart these words, because again, I think words like BI, it's like building BI, but what do we mean when we say that?
We need some BI around here. I don't know what it is, but we need some.
Sprinkle some BI on top.
Yeah, that would be helpful. No.
So even just thinking about dashboards, we think a lot about like two different things that people do with them, and that's just within dashboarding. So that's not even talking about self-serve reporting or like ad hoc stuff. But you get people who Squirrel, you're talking about there, putting up on the wall, for example, if you've got like a sales team or a support team or like a logistics kind of team, e-commerce, it's very live, it's very real time. That really is about action throughout the day, right? The whole purpose of that is like, I'm going to look at it, something's going to be off and I'm going to do something, or I'm going to look at it, everything's fine, nothing gets my attention, I look away and that's fine. That's a really specific thing that people are doing. That's really different to putting it up by the front door, because you want everyone in the company to kind of know how much money you're making and how many customers you have. That's a very different job that you'd be doing with those kind of tools. So I think that's the other thing I'd go back to is like, in terms of like how it's going to drive decisions, it is, what is it that this BI is meant to support? Can you tease apart BI into, oh right, we're trying to help people do X, and then fit your solution to be appropriate to that. So for example, if it is more about, let's say the company processes are built around like recurring weekly meetings. So you got like a management team meeting, and one of the big things you're doing is making sure that they've got a report that's always ready for them on Monday morning or whatever. Then one part of that is having it, but actually you could be thinking there about, well, how can we make sure that it gets to them and they know it's there and they actually use it in that meeting, right? So they don't forget about doing it. So you might look for systems that have notifications or have some kind of scheduled publishing type thing, because actually the whole thing you're trying to do goes all the way down to that. It's not just the creation of the
and
report.
It could be as simple as making sure it's in the invite and in the agenda, so that there's somebody who puts together the agenda and they make sure item 3 every time is look at the management report. It could be a human thing like that too. That it could be lots of different things. And one last thing for Wendy, I was coaching somebody on this earlier today. I know, Wendy, I think you are not leading the whole organization. I don't think you're a CEO type person who might be directly managing the people using this data. If I'm right in that remembering that about you, don't feel like you can't influence this, because often those of us who aren't in command of a group will say, well, I can just do what I'm told. I mean, all I can do is produce the thing, and I can hope people will put it on the agenda, but I can't make them do that. You have a lot more power than you think you do. And one of my favorite stories, I would love if somebody finds this story written down somewhere, because I've never been able to find like the details of it. But I know the outlines are true. Ben, do you know the company Nokia that make phones?
I do. My first phone was a Nokia 3210.
Fantastic. You might or might not know that they were founded as a timber company.
I did not know that.
So they used to cut down trees and put them in sawmills. That was what they did. And I think they're Swedish. I never remember. They're from one of the Nordic countries. And like 2 people in the 1950s who were way down in the organization, who were at a level that I think I'm guessing Wendy might be at. And those folks said, we're going to run out of trees sometime. There's only a finite number of trees here in our country. And, we can't do this forever. And I've heard about this stuff called transistors. They seem really interesting. We should find out about those. And they somehow, and this is where I'd love to know the details, they somehow managed to get the whole ship turned around and get enough people excited about it that Nokia founded a group that looked into transistors and then into radios and other things. I don't know what they built until they got to phones. So don't give up. Don't think that I can't influence that because I'm at the level where I am. There's actually a lot more that you can do than you think there is. And ask more about that here or on the Squirrel Squadron forum, for example, would be a good place to do that. Good stuff. All right. So excellent questions. I'm going to throw in one here in an attempt to be controversial, because Ben, we haven't argued enough. I have the feeling that you may violate. That's okay. Don't worry. I'm going to try to provoke some disagreement. Maybe you're going to agree with me. I'll fail, but we'll see. So I think it doesn't matter whether your data is accurate. And I'll say more about that. Often I will see people going to the nth degree to get precisely the right data. Let's use Edwin's example of e-commerce. That's one that's very familiar to me, and I think will be at least understandable to most of you. You're trying to get down to every single order. How about the one that was returned twice? We sent the data, we sent the material, the product. It was returned, and then it was returned again. We got to get those right. And then how about the ones where there was returned and then there was a chargeback and then we refunded the customer? How can we get the right number for those? And people will spend enormous effort trying to get down to the last decimal point of data. And actually, I find that the trend is much more important. So if sales are going up, if they're actually going down just a little bit, but they're mostly flat, well, that's giving me enough information if I can draw the graph. So even not having quite the right slope of the line or even not showing it correctly, look, I know it's not taking off. I know it's not flat. I know it's not going down, but I do know it's basically going up. And if there's some errors along the way, the accuracy is just not usually worth the squeeze. It's not worth squeezing that hard on the grapefruit to get that much juice. So Ben, you're probably looking for accuracy a lot. I bet your customers argue, you have a bug, somebody comes and yells at you. So do you agree with me, disagree? How do you see that?
Well, I think I'm going to disappoint you slightly, because I think I do largely agree within a certain context. So yeah, I think
okay. I'll try to be more controversial. What do you think?
Obviously not. Yes, we definitely, as a vendor, we want to make sure that the things that we're supplying to people are accurate, and definitely take a lot of effort. Which, in a sense, is also because then they don't have to worry about that, which is nice. But in terms of internal stuff, no, I mean I think it depends what you're doing. So for me, a lot of the things that I do, like internally, I'll joke that I know enough to be dangerous, but I also know that I'm not completely competent at certain things, and therefore, I can do analysis, I can do this, that, and the other. but there's probably mistakes. But they're not. I know enough to know they're not so fatal that the trend is, as you said, the trend is wrong. Like it's directionally accurate. And let's say I'm always missing a certain plan or something. Well, maybe I'm off by 10 all the time. But depending on what I'm doing, that may not matter, because I may, as you say, depending what the question I have is, as long as the question is not exactly how many of this do we have because we're being audited, or like we need to give a number to investors, it's kind of like, normally the question isn't that. The question
Even
is investors
don't care.
Or directions or something like that. You can really break it down. So I think the point where we have done the opposite, and like lately we have been investing more effort into trying to get it right, is the revenue numbers. So like for us as a SaaS business, we would like that to be pretty much spot on. We'd like to be able to predict it. Well, not predict it. We'd like to be able to rely on it with a certain degree of accuracy.
And I'm sorry, I didn't hear it quite right. What kind of numbers?
The revenue. So
revenue numbers.
MRR,
Yeah.
MRR numbers.
Yep. I still claim. So I'm going to disagree with you here. I claim that the direction is more important to you than the accuracy. If you knew it down to the penny, would that? Let's ask the driving question. Would that matter to you? I don't think it would.
No, I think not down to the penny. I think it's more about making sure there are not systematic errors in there that. So there you're thinking more like financial planning. Depending on how much flex you have in that, you may want to know it to a greater or lesser degree of accuracy. So that's probably the more of the context there.
And I like your example of being off by 10. If you're off by 10 all the time, then you're going to be off by 10 today and tomorrow and the next day. And if the trend is downward and less sales, you don't care that it's actually 10 wrong. It's like, we're selling less. We better do something.
Things are going the wrong way.
Trigger the discounts.
This is bad. Yep. But no, I think for most kind of general overview, for most making a quick assessment of something, or so example from today, I was looking at a certain funnel for one of our integrations. I was trying to say how's this looking? I'm not looking at it's 24.6%. Like, no, it's more like, well, it's, the chart looks like this, and how do I feel about that? So at no point in that investigation am I looking at the exact number against that.
Yep. And if it's systemically wrong, that might be something you'd eventually like to fix. But for that number, you're not, as Stuart was saying, maybe it's another way to say it is accuracy is more important than precision. We want accurate data that drives a business decision. The precision of, did we get exactly the right number? Could we prove in a court of law that it was right? Very unlikely to matter. Okay. And Star agrees. So she's out to bark again. Good stuff. So we have a very interesting question. I'm jumping around all over the place. I'm going to try to get to everyone's question. There's a bunch of really good ones. But Ian asks, a hard thing in BI data science is estimating the business value through the whole process. Any tips to help prioritize choices? Measuring business value is one of my favorite topics because I make IT teams insanely profitable. We got to measure the business value to be able to do that. Ben, do you want to take this one? Should I? What do you think about measuring the business value so you know what to build first?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing I find difficult perhaps there with that question is, if you don't have it, if you have nothing, if you've got no, again, sort of perhaps in Ian's question, like exactly what do we mean by BI and data science? There's some amount of it that it's almost like, well, if you don't have some amount of it, you can't measure any kind of business value because you can't measure anything.
Yep.
And it's almost like a foundation element of, in all that you do, you want ideally some way of saying, well, we did this thing, did it have the impact that we want? Which means you need to know where you currently stand and where you stand afterwards. And if you don't have enough in place to do that, I almost feel like there is no business value argument to be made because no one knows anything about business value at that point.
Yep.
It's like plumbing. You have to have it in place. I think going above and beyond perhaps gets more complicated, so a little bit trickier.
Fantastic. So I'm now going to speak Welsh for a moment, and I've put a Welsh word in the chat. I think I don't know if it's going to appear everywhere, but I will. I think I can show it. Can I? There we go. So this Welsh word turns out to be very useful, and I don't know if Ben remembers it. I'm sure we've talked about it at some point. Good news. So here's a hint. If you have a great consulting business idea, you have a new piece of intellectual property, do not name it after something in Welsh, because people will have really a hard time Googling for it, and they'll have to learn how to pronounce it. I'm going to teach you this Welsh word and then why it's relevant to this. So what, Ben, just do this with me if you don't mind. Say the word Kevin.
Kevin.
Yep, and then put a n in. So say n.
What, just at the end? No.
The word n, just to say n.
No. No.
Okay, so now we're going to do those together. Knevin. So we're saying There you go. Kenevin. That's the way you say it. Okay, so it's like Kevin with a n in the middle. Right. So why on earth is this useful? I hope some of you have Googled it to get a look at it. If you do, you'll see that there's this notion, they call it a sense-making framework. I don't know quite what that means, but it gives you 4 quadrants in which any situation might fit. And there's actually a 5th one, and they keep changing names of things, so I'm just going to give you the simple version. But I like to describe them in terms of vehicles, in terms of machines. So a simple situation is like my car. I hate cars. I drive them just to get places. I'm not a car fanatic. And so when I get in my car, it's automatic, and it kind of puts a parking brake on for me and stuff. I just have to push the pedals and make the car go. It's not that hard. So that's a simple situation where anybody could learn to do the action. A complicated situation is like an F1 car. So that's the next quadrant of Kenevin. And an F1 car, like I could not drive it for sure. And I don't know if Ben could, but I bet you'd find it challenging. But if one of us needed to, we could read a manual and study and work hard, and we could at least, probably not crash it. And if we really needed to, we could get an expert. We could hire Michael Schumacher or one of those people who are good at driving F1 cars and put them in it, and they could drive it for us. It's known. We understand how to drive a car, even if Ben and I can't actually do it. But then the much more interesting 2 categories, there's chaos, where there's no connection between what you do and what happens. But then the most interesting one is the one where most of us find ourselves in technology, especially in startups, is the complex domain. And that's one in which there's a connection between what you do and what the result is, but it is not known. You can't look it up in a manual. You can't get an expert in to tell you that human beings do not know this piece of information. And so now I'll tie this all back to the question of business value. Typically, in a situation where we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty, we're trying to discover things, we're trying to innovate and come up with new ideas, we're in the complex domain. And the only thing you can do in the complex domain, the way to make progress, is to probe and then sense, see what was happening, and then respond. So you try a thing, you see what the results were, and then you act. Okay, now finally coming back to Ian's question, having set all this up, well, why does that matter? Well, typically in a situation like Ian's describing, Ian, I've sometimes told, I think you told it the last time we were together on one of these events, where you have tons and tons and tons of data, loads and loads of CVs that somebody has built up over a long time in a recruitment company. And you take those and you're trying to figure out, what can I do with them? You don't know to start with. You don't know what the value is going to be by definition, but you know that when you have the data, when you have the information, you're going to be able to do probe, sense, respond, loop. And that's the value for me. So the thing I would optimize for there is what's going to allow me to do the maximum number of experiments, learn the most, change my behavior most rapidly. And in a case where you're dealing with a large amount of data that you don't understand, you don't know about, what's the simplest piece that will allow me to iterate and then learn about what the next most valuable piece is? So I don't know if that's a helpful guide. That's what I've told clients to do, partly inspired by you, Ian. So I appreciate that you're adding that.
I think that misinterpreted Ian's question. Yeah, it sounds more like he's in a situation where it's more like, yeah, we've got stuff, we've got this function of behind data science, and it's more like, well, what should we do?
No, I think I'm trying to answer the same question. I think you've understood it right.
Oh no, so, I think you're, yeah. I think my answer was perhaps more abstract from that, but yeah.
Well, I hope that it's helpful to Ian's question, and we'd love more. And I see more flowing in all the time, so we'll try to get to everyone. Tim has clarified his question. So he says, we spotted we could get BI from a dev tool, New Relic, and the New Relic was trying to make a play to try to make itself useful. It seems too techy. For example, New Relic, which is a particular tool for those who don't know, it's a tool that measures your application uptime and responsiveness and lots of other good things, and it kind of does it for you, which is very nice. You kind of install it and pay them a lot of money, and then you get a whole lot of kind of pre-made business intelligence about your application, which seems really useful. And Tim says, well, it's kind of aimed at developers, and they throw away the data after 30 days, so this isn't so useful to me. I see the challenge. And so, Tim, I'm just scrolling back to what your original question was. Yeah, what can we do for greater durability? well, one thing you could do is use Geckoboard, but I think you might need something ahead of Geckoboard. Geckoboard is going to help you display it. Ben, what kinds of tools do you see people using these days? What are people hooking up Geckoboard to that help them retain the data for a nice long time, so they're in control of it, and tells them about the behavior of their web application?
Yeah, good question. Fun fact about New Relic: they actually acquired one of our competitors, and as far as I know, it went nowhere and sort of died a death. So that's probably why it looks a bit like, oh, we can do this, and then you go there and you can't.
Got it.
So I think for me, it always comes back to like, where is the data in the first place? Because that is going to drive a lot of the options that you have. Like, it's a very sort of mundane factor, but if the data that you want to report on is in wherever S3, or if it's in some particular dev tool, or if it's in your own database, or whatever, in a sense, unless you want to put in a lot more work to move it from one place to another or change the tooling that you've got, you're going to have to work around that and say, well, what can I plug into the sources? And I think being pragmatic most of the time, you're going to want to do that. You're going to want to start with, where is the data that I want to do something with, and therefore what can I put on top of it to do the things I want to do. And I think there, shameless plug. If that is largely about display, dissemination, communication, creating clean, simple dashboards, Geckoboard, or one of our less good competitors, is a good fit for that, because we will connect to all of the different things that you've got and display that. But if you're looking for, actually sort of building self-serve reports, for example, with a bit of interactivity, some kind of filtering, again, I think it's hard to sort of say exactly where you should go. There's popular things like your lookers and so on, which are quite expensive. There's open source alternatives like Redash, Metabase, if it's more kind of database oriented. To be honest as well, there's new ones springing up every week. It always blows my mind how many new BI tools keep coming out, which I think was one of the questions back here about.
And everybody wants you to connect to all of them, I'm sure. And
yes.
So you have some APIs that lets people do that, I know, so that you don't have to build everything. But it's interesting to see how these are developing.
Tangible advice is probably start with where your data is now, and then look at what plugs into that gives you what you need. If your data isn't going anywhere now, or if you have some choice over that, then again, I think the question is, well, what is the data? What's generating it? If it's in a bunch of tools already, then either something like a Geckoboard is good because it's got integrations, or you may, if you want to go down the kind of warehouse route, there are tools that you can buy that will plug into all your sources and dump it into the warehouse, and then you can stick any such database-oriented BI tool on top of that.
Yeah, but one of my pieces of advice is certainly keep it as simple as you can. And the tendency is for vendors to sell you all kinds of clever things. Sorry, Ben, but for them to sell you all kinds of clever, complicated things. And actually, what you really need is to put some data in a spreadsheet and make sure it's in the agenda for the management meeting on Monday. And you can often get away without anything. So don't know if that's a helpful idea. Tim, ask us more if you'd like to. Very, very welcome. Happy to hear more. There's a very interesting discussion going on, so I'll try to track it through here. We've got Tom saying, I think the biggest concern about accuracy is trust. Perfect precision doesn't matter, but if numbers aren't self-consistent, it erodes all trust in what you're seeing. And then Ian says, +1, Tom, if you're directionally right, we think, but nobody checks what the errors mean. Getting trust behind the numbers to cause change is really hard. Trust is key. And Stuart weighs in and says he agrees. Well, this was a very interesting discussion on the Squirrel Squadron forum the other day. So this is an online forum I mentioned where folks in the executive part of my community can come in and ask each other interesting questions and argue with me and all kinds of other good stuff. And there's a very good comment from the CTO of an insurance company, actually, who's doing really well. And she said, man, I've really had to learn everybody else's language because I don't know insurance. And I've had to be learning about that and giving them the information. But when I can learn their language and when I can bring the useful information to them in a meaningful way and back it up, then I earn their trust. And I think that's just one of the most vital things that's important to do here. And the way you can do that is by involving the other folks who are going to be the recipients of your data in the design, so they understand what the limitations are and they understand what the trade-offs have been. Gosh, we're going to be wrong for people who return the object twice, the product twice. When it's returned twice, we're just going to get the wrong number. We're going to count it twice. But that happens in a tiny, tiny fraction of the cases. So when you see a little variation in the numbers, don't be surprised. It's probably double returns. But that happens so rarely that you have agreed that that's okay. In insurance world, there's a certain number of people who claim an excessive number of times, and they're probably fraudulent, and that's a tiny fraction of our claims numbers. So those numbers are going to be off because we're not going to try to correct for those. That's the kind of thing that she was finding is super important to do with the people in the rest of her organization. And I'm completely agreeing also with Tom, Ian, and Stuart that it is very important to make sure there is trust in your numbers. That's going to come from the conversations you have and the openness you have, the vulnerability, which we're talking about here, to say, well, these are going to be wrong by that. Here's how. If they simply let them be wrong and then say, you guys trust me, that usually doesn't work out very well. So
I think it's hard to pick up off Tom's point, who's so for those who don't know, what Tom exactly was, he's come to
exactly
inflammatory. But if I was to pick up on his point, I think the point about self-consistency is really interesting because, to some extent, like where does this inaccuracy creep in is one of the factors, and I think that is where the tooling side comes in and what systems you have in place, because in certain systems that you might be using, some of that might be abstracted away. So there you might have systematic errors, but everything will be internally consistent because that's right down at the sort of low definition level. I think challenges creep in when two different people in two different parts of the business have a different interpretation of signups or something like that. And then
or worse, two different pieces of data, two different sources, two different tools, which are storing the data differently and have different definitions.
Yeah, exactly. So I think where you can go more awry, I think, and get things more wrong is like the more you're having to work with the very, very raw data yourself, if there are quirks and oddities that you don't know, it's easier to make those misses. And so I think to some extent you have to look at like how complex your data setup is and like how approachable is it going to be to someone. So to give an example from us, like we have a data warehouse and in there there's lots and lots of tables, and there's a pass that you can make when doing some kind of analysis where you'll get an answer to your question. However, there are a lot of caveats and so on that are not necessarily encoded in those, right? Because some things you're doing, you're working with very, very raw data. So maybe you didn't exclude the test accounts, maybe you didn't exclude the internal accounts, maybe you missed the fraudulent signups or whatever. If you've got a lot of that, then that probably is more of a problem that I think you do want to address, because that is the kind of thing that is going to basically stop people engaging because they're going to make mistakes. It's going to be unhelpful to them.
It's going to erode trust, which is the opposite of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, so if you can abstract away those kind of complexities or like the things people have to do over and over and over again or that lead to those kind of problems, the better you are. Again, the more that you can try to do that once and have everything downstream of that, not have that, the better. But again, always treating that as an iterative process, because in reality, a lot of the problems, certainly that we end up finding, are like, you can't anticipate them up front necessarily. It's more like you find them later and you just need a way to go back and correct them and fix them.
Man, we never thought of that. And Edwin asks a good question earlier about the definition and attribution of data and how you document that. So I think that fits very nicely with what you're saying, Ben. So Edwin's asking, what counts as an order? My kind of topic I've been using here. Is it returned twice? Is a returned order still an order? Does it count? When does it count? When does it matter? And how do you document that? So my preference is usually away from detailed static documentation, simply because it gets so out of date. So my favorite technical solution, and don't worry, I'm going to give a non-technical solution too, but my favorite technical solution to this is to document it in readable tests. So I would expect that your BI tool or your tools that create this data would have some kind of unit tests, something that verifies that they are doing what you expect them to do. And when those unit tests run and when people read them, I would expect them to test for things like double orders. Returned orders are not counted as part of our order figures. Chargebacks are always discounted against our. We always have a discount allowance for chargebacks. Whatever it is, that would be documented in the tests. Now, of course, that's not meaningful to non-technical people because they're not going to go read your unit tests. But what I'd be looking for there is some kind of a very lightweight description, ideally one that comes along with whatever you're providing. So if it's a report, then it might be a page of the report that describes what assumptions underlie the report. How did we get to this information? I'm curious, how do you solve that in Geckoboard, Ben? Because on a dashboard or in a kind of easy, friendly report like the kinds that you guys create, you're not going to have a lot of space for that. So I'm giving solutions that would work in the kind of world I'm imagining, but yours is different. What would you do?
Yeah, so I think it's, if I was to think about it, I think there's two dimensions I think about. So one is the definition of the data itself, and almost kind of whether that information has to live alongside of it for everyone all the time, whether it's just easy to get to it in some way. So, for example, with something like Eckerboard, for the things that are perhaps more complicated, or where there's some ambiguity, where different people might have different versions of how to calculate a particular metric, we'll normally link that up to some kind of help documentation. But that's more a constraint, again, of coming from the TV background. So for us, having come from a TV focus, we've kind of made a conscious trade-off, which is, look, we can't include that information on the display. That's probably something we'd look to think about doing differently in the future. But if I think about sort of some of the other tools that we use, I think, to your point there, if the closer you can bring those definitions to the data you're working with, the better. So if I think about Mixpanel, which is one of the tools we use for product analytics, great event tracker, in there, the definition of the event lives alongside it, which is great because it means every time you're picking it, if there's any quirks or oddities, you can see them straight away. The challenge, of course, is that with any kind of static piece of text that lives in some tool, it's very easy to get out of date. You have all this horrible stuff about process for updating it, and then I'm not sure again, without introducing big human processes, that it's a problem that's easy to solve.
No. So here's an idea for a startup. If somebody wants to create a very exciting, interesting, fascinating startup, create one that takes your unit tests that make sure that it is automatically checking that the information has the characteristics that you're expecting it to have, and translate those into human readable text that somebody could attach to a graph or put as a footnote in a report or something like that.
Well, there's also that split between is it if you have a report, and if the report has a purpose and a particular time frame, and it's for this one thing, and then that's it, you obviously have a lot more degrees of freedom there to do that, because the person who's engaging with that is engaging with that report. They're going to look through everything, and or you can bring all the quirks and oddities to life. And I think in a sense that's easier than the dynamic context, where either you're providing self-service analytics to people, or you're providing sort of canned dashboards to people, and the things in them, because they're live, may by definition change over time.
Yeah, because I may add a new thing. I'd like, I'd like to see that in Asia. How do I get Asia? Okay, except does Asia include Hawaii? Well, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. What's your definition of Asia? Suddenly you've got tricky puzzles about what the data means. Well, Edwin, I hope we've at least helped you think about that one. I don't think we have a solution.
The moment it involves people, and people having to write things down and keep it up to date, everything
very dangerous. Watch out. Yeah, always a challenge. Good stuff. So I think we're going to come to a close there. We've got some great questions. Some we haven't got to, and I apologize for that, but I think we've got to most of the key topics. I don't think we've missed very many of them here. But you're always welcome to pose some more questions to me. I love hearing them. So you could do that on the Squirrel Squadron forum if you're on there. If you're not on there, you're welcome to ask. It's just for my executive community, but certainly open to having you guys join. I'm also happy for you to drop me an email, pick up the phone. My phone number is on douglassquirrel.com. I just added a little link that says, phone me now. So I like hearing from folks, and I'm very glad all of you have come. I've certainly learned a lot, and I'm grateful to Ben for coming along. Would love to see you at future events. Go to events, or just go to SquirrelSquadron.com. That's the easiest thing to do. I'll put that up here. For more free events, and none of this stuff ever costs anything. This is my way of giving back, so there isn't a pitch here. But if you head to SquirrelSquadron.com, you can find out about more live streams and events. Yeah, good. Ben's trying. Thank you. We're not really YouTubers, we're not doing it well, but that's okay. But love to see you there. Love to see you at future events. And if you'd like to come see me in person, I'm coming back to London. Going to be live and holding an event on the 5th of May on how to help your tech team be bolder. So come along to that by all means. Thanks again, Ben. Thanks everybody for great questions. And we'll see you again at another of these events very soon. Thanks.
Cheers.